Welcome to our video on astrological gardening, new moon in Aries, horoscope with astrology, planetary archangels, and zodiac angels to magically help your urban or suburban garden and or agricultural project accomplish success. You can feed your family while creating a healthy community environment. As we enter into the grand solar minimum and we continue to move into what could very well become a little ice age, it becomes more and more important to be able to harvest our food from God's own plentiful earth. Using astrology to increase yield from crops is essential, especially during this type of event. Now, first, our disclaimer: watching this video or reading the document attached is an act of spiritual willpower, and any such action is considered magic. High magic should be used with all mindfulness, since powerful forces of manifestation are unleashed. This is intended exclusively for entertainment purposes. I'm Pastor Rosemary, the Astrology Angel. I'm a Rosicrucian seer, biblical astrologer, Christian psychic, Gnostic mystic, and this is a Readings by Rosemary angelic transmission. Now, a new moon in Aries the Ram gives an occasion for induction of novel dreams and a prompting of heady action plans. Such plans are encouraged, particularly while attending stealthy or clandestine gatherings. Now, Luna modestly hides her moonlight for the interlude of this natural first house transit, setting into motion aspects of self and appearances. This lunar phase in the sign of Aries conceals plans devised by competing factions set to conquer opposing teams or groups in healthy competition, especially in the natural first house areas that have to do with how one presents oneself, or how one appraises one's own personality, and how one feels about one's own presentation. Now, Aries has an initiatory and a very active approach to life, with I am being the divine tone of the ram, and therefore Luna's dark phase gives this assertive zodiac sign opportunities for vivacious action plans, especially when it comes to increasing personal energy through vital aspects of competition in social or also in business gatherings or meetings or those types of arenas. Okay, so those types of areas are where this active energy of Aries is going to really shine. Now, Luna's dark phase is again, it's a time when there's going to be a concealing and a hiding. Okay, now hopeful individuals find ways to test their verve and defy their comfort zone as Luna now begins to wax. Set your aim high throughout this phase when ambitious goals are drawn up for implementation. Aries new moon grants an opportunity to nurture and tend to edible yields, as well as ridding neighborhood gardens or community farms of unwanted animals or counterproductive insects. New moon in Aries is a good phase for home gardeners or farmers when it comes to prioritizing personal chores and also figuring out which crops or projects are going to be the most beneficial to you for business ventures, so as to be able to engage in buying and selling in regards to local farmers markets. Now, persons with important fire elements in their natal charts are good choices when an assertive yet optimistic stance is needed for dealing with salespersons or competitors. Scheming for future opportunities, be they office or field related, are swiftly dealt with during this new moon phase in the sign of the Ram. Accounting for one's own happiness, for how one wishes to present oneself to others, becomes more significant when natural first house attributes of self and appearances are visited during a new moon in the phase of Aries the Ram. Gardeners, both urban and suburban, or farmers, often find great joy from focusing upon their various yields, primarily since cultivating produce requires a plentiful amount of attention to major weather events. Mindful preparation, planning ahead, and looking at what outcome one is striving to achieve, as well as foreknowledge about earth changes, is going to be, again, becoming and continuing to be more important as we move into this. Now, as we continue to enter into a little ice age similar to the Mound minimum that lasted 70 years from the mid-1600s to the early 1700s, keep in mind that some wild weather events and colder temperatures are to be expected, which will affect crops. It's important to understand how crops and societies are affected by grand solar minima. Valentia Zarkova is a mathematics professor in the UK at Northumbria University, and she has predicted that the sun's activity will decrease by 60% in the 2030s, which will be similar to the little ice age that occurred during the Maunder minima. Watchfulness and attentiveness to nature's larger cycles within planetary, lunar, and solar positions in the heavens, astrological houses, and seasonal considerations are all necessary factors regarding essential cultivation of any chosen crops, looking forward to thriving yields. Knowledge is the key, and knowledge about not just how, but what crops to plant, grow, harvest, and store for the benefit of self and others in your neighborhood or your community is going to be very necessary. First-class choices give way to a cornucopia of bountiful harvesting when under the care and watchful eye of the astrological gardener or farmer. This is an occasion in which to interact with elementals, especially the salamanders of fire, because Aries the ram is a cardinal fire sign, communicating with the undines of water, gnomes of earth, and sylphs of air, coming into effect together with a copious portion of ambition, all working together towards producing a vigorous crop and an abundant yield. Generally speaking, communicating with the moon during a new moon lunar phase while making sure to use endowments learned in regards to astrological planting and harvesting is of considerable value. Bring a surplus of riches and a treasure of wealth into your family and community by sowing seeds and reaping crops which will produce a plentiful quality of yield for food provisions. And also not only quality, but you want to have a good quantity. You want to have enough crops and a volume to feed everybody that needs to be fed. Such harvests can be shared communally within extended family circles and neighborhoods in a like manner, as well as varietal yields that are also able to be sold at local farmers markets. These concepts are especially important during a grand solar minimum, such as the one in which we now find ourselves. Generally, a new moon with its increasing moonlight is great for planting produce such as cruciferous vegetables, asparagus, lettuce, spinach, and those annuals with leaves growing above ground with seeds outside the crop. Cucumbers are an exception to this rule since they have seeds inside the produce. Now we're going to get into talking about specifically when Luna visits the zodiac sign of Aries the ram. Okay, so we're going to talk about the new moon in Aries the ram. Now before we get into the specific phase of the new moon, we're going to talk about what different types of events and activities are good and beneficial during a time when Aries moves into a lunar phase of some type. So we're going to talk about the general lunar phases in the sign of Aries. The sign of Aries, the ram, first, okay? We're going to talk about that first. Now, when the moon visits Aries, in any of the phases, and various and sundry phases, there will be moon phases that are good for cultivation of soil and crops, when you can go ahead and engage in that activity. There will also be lunar phases in Aries when cold weather crops such as rye, oats, rice, and barley may be planted. Now, in some locations closer to the equator, it will still be possible to plant corn and millet even during the grand solar minimum. Sugarcane is another crop that is beneficial to plant during some specific moon phases when Luna sojourns through the sign of Aries the ram, which we will discuss in a moment. Aries possesses various moon cycles good for irrigation, scattering seeds for livestock, composting, digging and reaping, cultivating beds, drying or desiccating produce, storing dried yields, and for eradication of pests. We will now discuss the specific moon cycles. Now, sowing seeds is not recommended during a happening of Aries new moon. It's not recommended to sow or plant seeds during Aries new moon. Specifically, throughout a concealed moon phase in the sign of the ram, the urban or suburban gardener or farmer does well to allow rest from cultivation and planting. This is a destructive lunar phase, best left undisturbed. it is possible to engage in a small amount of cleanup activities, such as removing unwanted flora and fauna from one's lands. Remember that Aries is a masculine sign, being yang in nature, a fire sign, dry and blazing, affording masculine qualities of desolation, tempestuousness, and therefore having an inflammatory character about it. Aries has a designation of the ram, due to its placement on the astrological agricultural seasonal wheel, where it is considered forceful and energetic, initiating fiery ideas in a dynamic manner. Since Aries is akin to the natural first house of self and appearances, this is a helpful occasion to consider one's own concerns and priorities when it comes to preparedness, food production, and land cultivation, especially when establishing family, neighborhood, and community edible gardening or farming projects that you are involved in. Normally, during a new moon lunar cycle in general, urban and suburban gardeners will prevail, gaining a green thumbs up by planting parsley, celery, broccoli, cabbage, oats, quinoa, millet, wheat, flaxseed, rye, spinach, endive, and lettuce. Also corn and rice, to name just a few of familiar eatables utilizing annuals which flourish above ground. Now, crops with seeds developed on the outside are best at this portion of lunar phases. A new moon is the beginning of a waxing moon from new moon to full moon portion of a lunar cycle. Water in the earth will be pulled up by Luna just like her sway over ocean tides. Although 24 to 48 hours before a full moon is the phase which provides an even larger gravitational effect. A new moon makes abundant water available for growth. Now, specifically during a new moon in the sign of Aries the Ram, focus upon resting one's self or one's lands, or if some activity must be done, use this phase to exterminate unwanted bugs or animals. An urban or suburban gardener ought to wait until a second quarter waxing moon phase in Aries to cultivate soil, water, or reap crops. Please note that 24 to 48 hours before a full moon in the sign of Aries the Ram, when Luna is waxing strongly, is a useful time to plant sugarcane crops. You will have to wait for a full moon in Aries for a good occasion to plant oats, barley, wheat, rye, or millet, or corn yields. As an Aries bright moon is also good for scattering seeds, for grass or grain feed for farm animals. Wait for a mature third quarter moon or a fourth quarter waning moon phase in Aries to cure and dry produce for storage, cultivate soil or compost piles, reap or burrow. Now, planetary archangel Gabriel rules over Luna, and this is, though, on a new moon expressing receptivity. So you see here, this is the Merkaba field, Mer meaning rotating fields of light, Ka meaning spirit, and Ba meaning soul. The Merkaba field is a three-dimensional representation of the Archangel of Water, who is the Archangel Gabriel. Okay? So this is a representation of the Archangel, the elemental Archangel, who is Gabriel, who rules over all the water signs. But the reason we're calling up Gabriel, even though we're talking about Aries, which is a fire sign, is because the moon's planetary angel is the Archangel Gabriel. So sometimes there's some overlap there. All right? So remember, planetary Archangel Gabriel rules over Luna, although on a new moon, expressing receptivity. Now, Aries is martial in nature, with Mars being Aries the Ram's ruler. Therefore, planetary influences of Seraphim Mars, of the Seraphim of Mars, who is the Seraphim Samael, hold sway during a new moon in Aries. So that's a very strong, forceful energy. Now, the elemental archangel of fire, being the Archangel Michael, is associated with this cardinal fire sign of Aries the Ram. So see, you have here, you have the Merkaba field, of the three-dimensional Merkaba field of the Archangel of Fire, who rules over all the fire signs, the Archangel Michael. Now, Michael is also the planetary Archangel of the Sun, but in this we're using this representation here for the purpose of using it for giving him the designation, the Archangel Michael, as the elemental archangel of Aries, because Aries is cardinal fire. Okay, initiatory. Okay, the initiatory, that initiatory spark. Okay, so this is the representation of the fire, Merkaba field of the fire archangel, and we're talking about elemental archangels. All right. Now, since Mars is the ruler over this cardinal fire sign in the zodiac of Aries, the ram, being the daytime abode of this war god red planet, keep in mind that Aries is fire of fire, the fire angel of the fire realm, and therefore it is important to invoke into oneself, to invoke into one's sacred circle, or to call upon, to evoke is to call upon the martial zodiacal facet known as the attribute of God the warrior, found in Exodus chapter 15 verse 3 in the Douay Rheims Bible. The Lord is a man of war, almighty is his name. Now, Zodiac Angel Mechidael rules over Aries the ram astrology sign. So these are the associations for you, the angelic and biblical associations. Speaking of the new moon, we turn to 1 Timothy chapter 2 verses 2 to 1 in the new verses 1 to 2 in the New Heart English Bible. I exhort therefore first of all that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, or kings, and all who are in high places, that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and reverence. Information found in this document is based on the oral tradition known as Kabbalah, taught to me by Rosicrucian clergy when I was but a young girl, the facts of which I have committed to memory. Thank you for joining us, and please join us again.